Welcome to Food for Thought. Today's topic is finding abundance while traveling in general and in Ireland in particular. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. I'm your host. My work is dedicated to empowering people to live meaningfully, compassionately, and healthfully with abundance and joy. I've been doing this for 24 years now, and you can find lots of resources in my books, in this podcast, in the offshoot podcast called Animology, through my daily social media posts, and through my joyful vegan trips, curated, all-inclusive vegan trips around the world. You can find out more at joyfulvegan.com. And as always, this podcast is 100% listener supported. So if it's something you value, please join other supporters by going to joyfulvegan.com/donate. You can also go to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. A little easier to remember, joyfulvegan.com/donate. Thank you so much. As I work on new episodes, I thought you would enjoy this one from the archives. As always with rebroadcasts, you may hear things that are no longer relevant. In this episode, for instance, you might hear a mention of the Compassionate Cooks Club. This episode originally aired in 2010, and before we were using Patreon, we had a Compassionate Cooks Club. So for instance, that is no longer relevant. I might mention restaurants that are no longer in business, but the core message is timeless, that living vegan, traveling as a vegan is a joyful, sustainable, delicious way to live and travel. I hope you get that impression listening to this episode. It was also a bit nostalgic. Revisiting this episode, I cut some things from the introduction where I announced that 3 of my books were either coming out or had just come out. That was Color Me Vegan, Vegan's Daily Companion, and the 30-Day Vegan Challenge. And as I always say, the only constant in our lives is change. And today, as I record this new introduction, Color Me Vegan and Vegan's Daily Companion are now out of print, which is why I urge you to enjoy my recipes in my recipe packets and in my on-demand classes and in my online cooking classes, a huge library of which is at joyfulvegan.com in the store, because lots of the books that I have published, let's see, I've written 7 books and 4 are out of print. 3 are out of print. 4. Anyway, the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, that was a victim of a lawsuit between my publishers, and it wound up being pulled and destroyed. That was the original version of the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, which I announced in the original episode here, published by Random House. But that particular edition is gone, and that's why I redirect you to the edition that I self-published a year after that, after all of that chaos and disruption. And that, of course, is still in print, and you can get it directly from me at joyfulvegan.com. So times change, lessons are learned, life goes on, and here I am over a decade since this episode, well over a decade, continuing to do my best to inspire and inform. So I hope you get something out of this podcast, the rebroadcast of which was inspired by the fact that when you're listening to this or when I'm releasing it again, it is St. Patrick's Day. And you can find a St. Patrick's Day menu over at joyfulvegan.com. In the store, you can also find a blog post about the history of St. Patrick's Day and why we celebrate it in the United States differently than they do in Ireland. And I just thought it was really perfect to rebroadcast this episode about travel. And speaking of travel, we do have a couple spots left in our June 2023 Tuscany trip, as well as in our 2 France trips. One trip is to the Loire Valley and one trip is to Alsace. So head over to joyfulvegantrips.com. You can get your free Joyful Vegan travel guide, which you'll hopefully be inspired to want to read after listening to this episode. And you can also book your spot on a Joyful Vegan trip with me, joyfulvegantrips.com. Okay, enjoy this episode and take care. So first, I want to thank listener sponsor Victor Owens, who, along with his membership, sent me a beautiful email. He wrote, "Hello, Colleen. I thought I would send you a note about my recent discovery of your podcast. Actually, I downloaded a few episodes to my iPhone a few years ago, but for some reason did not begin listening to them until a few weeks ago. I have been a quasi-vegetarian for over 20 years, not eating beef, pork, chicken, etc., but occasionally consuming seafood. My consumption of seafood was so solely when eating out, special occasions, for business, client entertainment, business dinners, etc., but never purchased or cooked seafood in our home. Interestingly, or ironically, my 18-year-old son, who has never consumed any animal flesh, has often ribbed me for eating seafood. He told me I was being inconsistent. True enough. Well, since listening to the first few episodes of your podcast, I was hooked and downloaded the entire library and have been listening nonstop. I'm about halfway through. Your intelligent, well-communicated, sincere, and passionate expression of the vegan lifestyle from both the ethical and health perspectives has awakened my consciousness, and I have made a personal commitment to eliminate animal products of all forms from my diet. In addition to purchasing the vegan table, I have also recently joined your Compassionate Cooks Club. My son, who does eat dairy and eggs, has joined me in going through your book, reading the commentary, and looking for recipes that jump out at us. And he's also now considering taking the next step to a cruelty-free diet. Thank you for your podcast, your writings, and commitment to all forms of life. You are truly inspiring. Thank you, Victor. You are the inspiring one. I am just a conduit, and I am grateful to be so. So thank you for being open to receiving the information and acting upon it. I am inspired and grateful. I also want to thank our other listener sponsor today, who I think you'll also be inspired by. This is Todd Pope, who wrote, "Hello, Colleen. I stumbled onto your work via your baking cookbook. I've been listening to your podcasts over the last several days, and they are thoughtful, sane, and compelling. I had actually been lacto-ovo vegetarian twice in my life, first at age 19 and later in my early 30s. I backslid both times based on social pressure and convenience. I know I was telling myself the lie that California dairy cows are quote-unquote happy cows, and that quote-unquote free-range eggs come from happy chickens running around in some verdant pasture. I thought that being a vegan was too hard, too weird, and where would I get my protein? Roll eyes here. I am happy to say that at age 40, my partner and I have both decided to go vegan. We can no longer participate in the horrifying cruelty inherent in the meat, dairy, and egg industries. For the first time, I can snuggle with our 3 kitties and not feel like a hypocrite. Also, I am a physician, and I have watched and treated the ravages of heart disease and stroke for the last 10 years. It saddens me to think of how many cases could have been prevented with a vegan lifestyle. You have inspired me to win hearts and minds by being a joyful vegan and by cooking amazing food for my friends, family, and coworkers. So thank you for your amazing work." Thank you, Todd. I'm so thrilled. I'm just bowled over by people like you. I am so thrilled. And I hear that from so many people about how they feel more compassionate and close to their companion animals when they finally stop eating other domestic animals. It's just so, it's so consistent to make this change. And I know exactly where you're coming from. So you are incredibly inspiring, and thank you. And what's so beautiful, if you've noticed by both Todd and Victor's letters, is that they are then creating this ripple effect with their partners, with their sons, with their children, with their coworkers and other family members, and you know, in Todd's case, with his patients. I mean, the ripple effect is huge. And so with us just making this change and being joyful and spreading the word, certainly through positive reinforcement and through food, it makes a huge difference for everybody around us. So thank you, Todd and Victor. I am so thrilled. Now, onto our episode, onto the topic. As I said, we talked about vegan travel in the past, and what I want to do is focus on this trip to Ireland. But first, what I'm going to do is talk about some general tips. Now, one thing you realize when you travel frequently, and this is something that you realize, I don't know, maybe it took me a long time to realize this, is that it's really easy to find junk food everywhere you look, but to find really good, healthful food on the road requires a little more effort. Now, healthful options are definitely more available these days in more places than ever before. That is true. I've seen that change, absolutely. But I think it's important to keep in mind that fast food joints, tourist destinations, airports, even just regular restaurants, by their very nature, cater to people who are either indulging themselves, you know, treating themselves, or are, for whatever reason, choosing convenience over health. So by their very nature, these places are not serving our desire to be healthy. Now, I think that's changing because I think people really want to be able to find healthful options while they're on the road, while they go to a restaurant, et cetera. Because, look, I mean, chefs are trained to provide the most fat and salt to their patrons. They put fat and salt in their food to keep people coming back. I mean, that's really how chefs are trained, especially restaurant chefs. But things are changing. So there are definitely more healthful options more than ever before. But what I want to emphasize in saying this is that it's not the fault of being vegan, that it's challenging or could be challenging, not all the time, to find nutrient-dense food on the road. The problem is that we, as individuals and as a society, have traditionally not made eating well a priority, whether we're eating at home or traveling or eating out in a restaurant. The truth is that eating vegan on the road is easy in most places and a little challenging in others. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for and taking the time to prepare, which everyone should do whether they're vegan or not, or traveling or not. And I talk about this a lot, is taking the time to plan in advance, whether you're having dinner, that night, or whether you're going on an airplane and you're going to be away from home for 10 days. Planning in advance is key to eating healthfully consistently. Now, one of the things that we all agree on, most of us know how important food schedules are to infants and to children. But at some point in our lives, as we grow into adults, we stop making this a priority for ourselves. I'm just so struck by this. Parents of young children would never leave the house without snacks for their kids, right? They would never do that. Why? Because they know as their kids' blood sugar gets low, the kids might get cranky, they get tired, they just get, just kind of unsettled. And certainly food really helps that. So they never get to that point, or so you can avoid getting to that point. Hunger really makes us cranky. It makes me cranky, at least. And I think we need to honor this. We really need to honor this in ourselves. Instead, we usually create helter-skelter lives without routine or order. And that's exacerbated when we travel. Now, some of you regular listeners know that I eat my meals the same time every day, which is so helpful for me because I know exactly what's wrong with me if my mood changes or my energy level drops. I know exactly what it is. There's never X factors, or, very rarely there are X factors where I don't know why I feel bad. If I feel, kind of cranky, or if I feel lethargic, it's usually because I'm not eating, or because I'm hungry. And I know this about myself now, and it's so helpful for me. One of the most stressful components of travel for me is straying from my eating schedule, especially when there's a time difference. So I do everything I can to keep some kind of regular routine when I'm on the road. Now, that's just me. You might be different, but I really do think making sure we have food all the time when we're on the road, when we're traveling, makes all the difference in staying just, consistent and happy. But the truth is, no matter how hard I try, when I travel, I do accept that I will be eating less optimally than when I'm in my California home with my garden and, fresh vegetables and fresh produce all the time. But I do try to follow some guidelines so that I make traveling as pleasant as possible. So as I said, I try and keep as close to an eating schedule as possible, and I factor this in when I'm traveling, especially in different time zones. I try to avoid getting hungry so my energy level stays consistent and strong. I think it's really important. And I try to eat as healthfully as possible when I'm traveling, but I do accept that sometimes I might have to choose calorie density over nutrient density. In other words, eating a meal of French fries and salted peanuts, an apple and crackers, in an airport or something is better than going hungry if those are my only options. And the truth is, there really is never a risk of me going hungry. I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. I'm not going to starve, when I'm traveling. There's always something to eat somewhere. It may not be as good as what I'm going to have at home, but if the whole point of just eating is to make sure that I have the energy I need to function, then sometimes that's just good enough. But that doesn't mean this is always the case. I mean, obviously we want to enjoy it too, and that's what I'm going to talk about as well. Now, these goals can be reached no matter where you're traveling to or what your mode of transportation is. If we're talking about airports, if my mode of transportation is an airplane, then depending on the time of my flight, one of the things I try to do before I leave for the airport, even if I know it's a vegan-friendly airport, is to eat before I leave and just get filled up. So that way food is out of the way. Hunger is not a factor when I get to the airport. I can just focus on getting through security and onto the plane, which is stressful enough for most of us. However, the need will most likely arise when you need to eat at an airport. Now, when it comes to vegan food, some airports are definitely better than others, but honestly, you will always be able to find something. It might be a bean burrito at Taco Bell. Their refried beans, I'm sure I've said before, are made in vegetable oil, not animal lard. So just ask for no cheese and no sour cream. You can get a great vegetable sandwich at Subway, pile on the veggies, ask for some oil and vinegar or mustard instead of the mayonnaise they put on. Most airport restaurants have pre-made food, but there are often vegan options. And again, some are more healthful than others. I've pointed this to you before, but go to pcrm.org. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine puts out a list of airports with the best vegan options. So you can go to their website and find some of these airports. Now, it changes every year, so I think it's just best if you go to the website and check for yourself rather than me name some here. I don't want it to be too dated. In terms of general ideas, you can often find quote-unquote vegan food, because don't forget we're talking about real food here, in various types of restaurants. But in addition to what you're going to find in, Mexican restaurants or Thai restaurants, because you're always going to find something there, many cafes sell bagels. They can toast for you. And most of them, I don't think I've ever encountered one that didn't. Most of them have peanut butter instead of dairy-based butter, which is they have dairy-based butter too, but most of them have peanut butter, and you can just ask them to toast your bagel and spread some peanut butter on. And, tell them no dairy-based butter. And if they don't have peanut butter, you can ask them for some jam or for some jelly. I usually have a couple of these made for me so that I have extra when I get on the plane. Many kiosks in many airports sell bagged nuts, bagged seeds, energy bars, trail mix. I've seen fruit leather, baked chips, pretzels, bananas, apples. So again, you can find these kinds of things to just keep yourself sated while you're on the plane. They're really good to snack on the plane. Many airports also, I've noticed, have fruit smoothie or fresh fruit juice stands. Like I've seen Jamba Juice in a number of airports, and the default milk for Jamba Juice, for most of the Jamba Juice smoothies, is soy milk, which is really exciting. The default milk, which means that people who want dairy-based have to ask for it. But the default milk is soy. Now, they tend to put frozen yogurt or sherbet in with some of these smoothies, and you can just ask them to eliminate that. They're so flexible. And what I usually do is tell them to take out the sherbet and put in a banana. So like my favorite smoothie at Jamba Juice's is a green tea smoothie, which is so fantastic. It's green tea, matcha. It's a matcha green tea smoothie. And I just ask them to take out the sherbet, put it in a banana, and it's fantastic. But even if you can't find something like this, like a specific smoothie place, many cafes nowadays sell things like Adwala smoothies, so you can still get a healthful snack that'll be filling and nutritious. So that with, a peanut butter bagel, it's fantastic, and grab a banana as well. Now, once you're on the plane, your options are fewer, which is why I think it's really helpful to grab some of these things before you get on the plane so that you don't have to starve while you're on the plane. Free meals on airplanes are virtually obsolete on most airlines unless you're traveling first class or on an international flight. If you are, I highly recommend that you contact the airline at least 24 hours in advance to confirm your special meal. If you don't do this, it's unlikely your meal will be in the system. So call, even if you've arranged it when you first got your tickets, call again, 48 hours, at least 24 hours in advance to make sure your request is in the system. The airlines vary in terms of offerings and quality, but I've had Amy's Organics burritos and fajitas on the plane. I've had some pretty decent green salads, vegan cookies. I've also had some really good Indian meals. These are often called non-dairy strict vegetarian or Hindu non-dairy, depending on the airline. So just ask them what their strict vegetarian, they call it, or vegan option is called, and just arrange for that. When you're in coach or, in the economy cabin, or you're not on an international flight, they tend to have snack boxes for people to purchase now. And most of these are filled with, chicken sandwiches and crackers and cheese and stuff. But that's why think planning in advance will be the most helpful for you. So what I also do is, even, not wanting to have to rely on buying food at the airport, this is easier to do when I'm coming from home and going to a destination. It's harder to do this when I'm leaving my destination and coming home. So when I'm leaving home, I can obviously make some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and wrap those up really well. They travel really well. I can make some hummus and roasted red pepper wraps, with just a lavash or a tortilla. I always cut up carrots and celery and cauliflower. Snow peas are also great. Bell peppers get too funky. So the heartier raw vegetables like carrots and cauliflower are so great. So I always have baggies of these vegetables on the plane. So while I'm reading or watching a movie, I'm just munching on these raw veggies, which is fantastic. And if you want to bring some hummus or a little container of peanut butter to dip them in, you can do that as well. I always bring, some nuts. I love walnuts and almonds. Pistachio nuts are also good. Granola and trail mix, those are really great. And, I'll bring apples and dates and that kind of thing. Bananas don't travel well unless you eat them in the beginning of your trip, but fresh fruit and energy bars. This is the time when I do tend to eat Cliff bars or, all the Luna bars and whatever bars you like. But this is probably the only time that I really eat energy bars because they're really convenient. So this is a little easier when, like I said, you're coming from home and going to your destination. But frankly, if you bring extra energy bars, you can have them with you on your return trip back home. Other convenient travel foods include whole grain crackers, popcorn. There's lots of times I'll pop some popcorn before we go, and I'll throw that in our bag. Vegan jerky. There's jerky you can also bring, and whatever you want. Whatever you like. Other convenient travel foods include whole grain crackers. There's homemade popcorn. Often I will make a bunch of popcorn and put that in our bag. Now, obviously, I can't fit too much. We never check bags, so obviously we're challenged by having limited things in our bags because we've got our computers usually and books and papers and that kind of thing. But I do love taking popcorn with me on the plane. Vegan jerky. There's so many options of convenience foods you can take on the plane with you. It's up to you. And as you know, I never travel without my stainless steel water bottle for cold water. And now I can't even tell you how excited I am about this. My tea thermos for hot water. You can't bring filled water bottles through the security gate, but you can bring empty ones. So I bring my stainless steel water bottle, and I fill that up when I get on the other side of the security gate with water. So I have that. And now with my tea thermos, I cannot even tell you how much this has changed my life. I recently discovered this at REI, but REI is a sports store, for hiking and other sports and things like that. So I found it at REI, but it is actually in my Amazon store now. It's in my Amazon store, so you can buy this yourself. If you go to compassionatecooks.com and then under shop, you click on our favorite, buy our favorite books and kitchen items, I think it's called. And in the featured favorites section, which is the first page you'll come to, you'll see this tea thermos. For some reason, the photo doesn't show up on that first page, but once you click on it, you'll see the photo of it. So basically what it is, it's a thermos. It's a thermos, so it stays hot forever. And then at the top, so there's two different lids. The bottom lid has holes, which is the strainer essentially. So that when you drink it, that's what you drink it through. It strains immediately, so you don't obviously take all the leaves into your mouth, the tea leaves. So basically you just put the tea leaves directly into the thermos and then the hot water, close it, and then you have the drinking lid, which has the strainer built right into the lid. And then you have a top on top of that to keep it closed so it doesn't spill, obviously. It changed my life because I used to travel with this spoon strainer, which was fine. On the plane, it was fine because I would have the little spoon strainer, stainless steel filled with tea leaves. And then on the plane, I would just ask the attendants for hot water that I would continually ask for and steep the tea that way. But traveling around, when I'm actually on city streets or whatever, it's just not as convenient. It's kind of messy. I would always put it in a plastic bag and then I would put a cloth napkin in with it so that it would soak up any water while it was wet. It was just kind of messy. But after getting this tea thermos,
we were in Ireland. I bought it right before we went to Ireland. And oh my God, if David didn't hear me say 50,000 times how happy I was with this thing, then he never heard me ever, because it was so fantastic, because I could have tea all the time with me. And again, to my point about not wanting to get off of my routine, that routine has to do with food, but it also has to do with my tea, to be really honest with you. Not only because I am an admitted junkie. I mean, I know I'm a junkie, but also because I really enjoy having my tea, after I eat. I enjoy having my tea when I wake up in the morning. And anyway, it's fantastic. So I love it. I highly recommend it. I was able to fill it up. I would go to a restaurant, fill it up with they would fill it up for me with hot water, fresh tea. And, the tea that I would bring along, I'd still bring my tea along with me. And then I'd have it, while we're just walking around, and I'd have my tea all the time. So it was fantastic. The problem is that it almost caused us to divorce, because I actually left it in a restaurant in Dublin, and it delayed when we were supposed to leave the next day, because the restaurant didn't open when it said it was supposed to open. So we had to wait 2 hours for the restaurant to open. So it did affect our marriage a little bit, but David, I think he has forgiven me, because he knew how much it meant to me. He heard me rave about it so much that he knew it was worth waiting for this thing, for me to retrieve it. So anyway, I'm sorry I spent so much time on that. I was so excited to tell people about this thermos. So it actually works almost too well, because it's a thermos. The hot water stays hot a long time. So there were times where I would go to drink it and burn my tongue, because 2 hours after I added the hot water, it would still be hot. So anyway, that's that. So I always travel with my tea, and now my thermos. Moving along, as far as accommodations and such, although I have to say, when we're talking about hotels, tea drinkers really are just second-class citizens, because the only hot water options there tend to be are coffee pots. And I cannot tell you how disgusting it is. I'm not a coffee drinker. I've never had coffee in my life. And when I want tea, I just want fresh hot water. I don't want my tea to be tainted with the taste of, coffee that's been sitting there, on the filter. It's just disconcerting. But anyway, I survive. But as far as food goes, chain hotels always have something to eat at their buffet. So you can find bagels, and again, you can have them toasted, and you can ask them to add peanut butter, and jam is usually on the table. You can ask for fresh fruit. You can ask for cereal. Unless noted, the pastries and the pancakes and the waffles all tend to contain animal products. Some large hotel chains do carry soy milk, and just ask them. Soy milk does tend to be the default milk, by the way. I realize there are other non-dairy milks, but it tends to be soy milk when we're talking about hotels. And you can just use that milk for the cereals they offer. If the hotel does not have non-dairy milk for the cereal, you can order a fruit salad to put in with the cereal. I know people who've just put in orange juice with their cereal. So, whatever. Who says that milk, it has to be the beverage to moisten our cereal? Why can't it be a juice? So just use juice if you don't have a non-dairy milk. Now, bed and breakfasts are a different story. I've talked about this before. Proprietors of bed and breakfasts often love to show off their creativity by making delicious vegan breakfasts upon request. So contact them beforehand and ask if they'll accommodate you. Whenever I contact bed and breakfasts, I always get overwhelmingly positive responses. Never estimate how joyfully people will rise to accommodate you when you ask for what you want. But to experience this, you have to ask for what you want, and do so with joy and humility. Now, whether you're staying in a chain hotel or a bed and breakfast, another thing you can do is, like I said, you always have access to hot water. It might be tainted hot water because it has some remnants of coffee in it. When I heat up hot water for my tea in a hotel room, what I usually do is remove the filter. I remove as much as I can so that the hot water just goes directly from from that little tank in the back down to the pot. And so you can remove the filter so that you're not getting this extra, coffee resin. So you always have access to hot water. And if you bring packaged oatmeal, little oatmeal packets, or little dry soups, or dry noodle dishes, or quick cooking oats, or even those pre-made Indian foods. I mean, there's so many things like that. If you have those on hand, then you just add hot water and you have a hot filling meal anytime you want, in the airport, in the hotel room, whatever. Now, all of these principles apply whether you're traveling domestically or internationally. And it's true, that some cultures and some countries are more vegan friendly than others, but you may be surprised by the number of options you find. Cities are certainly more vegan friendly than rural areas, but there are still always things to eat. Like I said, you will never be at risk for starving while you're on vacation. That's not what we're talking about here. I've had some of the most memorable meals while traveling, and I've had some that fulfilled only one essential need, which was filling up my belly. And sometimes that's just good enough. In whatever towns I do travel to, one of the first things I do is scope out a health food store, which many large and small cities have. If our hotel doesn't already have non-dairy milk, I usually buy some at the store, and then I ask the hotel to keep it in the refrigerator. At the health food store, you can also get, nuts and granola and other healthful snacks. And many towns, large and small, have farmers markets and farm stands from which we have crafted the most delicious meals based on local produce and fresh breads. So I'm going to talk about some of that when I talk about our visit to Ireland, which I'm going to do now. So recently we did travel to Ireland, and might I suggest September as a lovely time to go. The tourists are gone and the flights are less expensive and the weather tends to be pretty good. Before we left for our trip, as with any trip, we researched restaurants and accommodations. And so we knew that some of the areas we were staying in had vegetarian or vegetarian-friendly restaurants. I also contacted all the different hotels we were staying in to make sure they would accommodate our needs. And because each of them provided breakfast, the places we stayed. We didn't stay in strictly bed and breakfast. So in Ireland, when we're talking about bed and breakfast, they really are people's homes that you're staying in. We didn't stay at what are considered bed and breakfast, but we stayed in different hotels and different boutique hotels that did serve us breakfast. Each one of them did. So we just contacted them beforehand and made sure they would accommodate us, and they all very quickly said they would. It was not a problem. And also we brought hooded jackets, which I highly recommend you bring to Ireland with you. Those of you who've been there or live there know what I'm talking about. The rain comes very unexpectedly throughout the day, and it was great to just throw our hoods on and the rain would come, and then the rain would go away and we would take our hoods off, and it was so convenient. So we didn't even carry an umbrella around. It was easy just to have our hooded jackets. So that with a tea thermos, I recommend. Now, I'm going to share with you our travels in Ireland, certainly in terms of food, but I'm also going to share some things that we did in terms of, kind of tourist things that we did, some of which touch on history, some of which touch on literature, some on natural beauty, some music, and some on animal protection. So it's related, and people really do, when you're traveling, it's not just about the food. It's about, what to do when you get there. So I'll just tell you some of the things we did. And I do think they're relevant, at least many of them are relevant to our topic here on animal protection and veganism. And obviously I'll talk about food and our options in the different places. Now, we started in Dublin, and as I said, cities are the easiest places to find vegan food. Now, Dublin has a number of vegetarian-specific restaurants, like restaurants that are just vegetarian restaurants. So that was fun, and that was really easy. So we arrived in Dublin very early in the morning after 2 planes and an overnight flight. We were a little tired. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning when we did arrive in Dublin, and the boutique hotel that we were staying at in Dublin, it's called Number 31. I highly recommend it. It's a great location, really friendly service, really interesting architecture. An architect had actually built it. So it's really a lovely space. And we arrived there at around 8:30, and we were earlier than check-in time, because obviously check-in time was around 3 o'clock. But we just wanted to get there so we could put our bags down and then hit the streets of Dublin. And they were so friendly. They invited us up to breakfast right away, because breakfast had been going on for the guests who were already there. And it was perfect because they actually had our room ready for us by the time we finished breakfast. So we were able to just freshen up before going out. Now, like I said, I contacted them in advance, and I was assured that it would not be a problem to accommodate us. And, everything I saw on different review sites said that they were really known for their baked goods, but that's fine. We didn't need baked goods. I mean, obviously their baked goods were not vegan. We were fine with that. But when we arrived, and this was on a day that, again, they didn't expect us to eat breakfast this day, and immediately they made us a beautiful breakfast. It was delicious. It was pan-fried portobello mushrooms, which were juicy and firm. They were so delicious. They made roasted tomatoes. They made potato cakes, which they made for other guests, but they left out the eggs for us, and they were perfect, and they were still intact and fine. And then, of course, there were the cereals and granola, and there was toast with homemade jam. There was fresh fruit. Now, This was the first day we were arriving, and they didn't expect us for breakfast that day, but they didn't have soy milk. I was a little disappointed because I had contacted them and said, over and over, will you accommodate us? So we just bought soy milk the next day, and we kept it in their fridge, and we had it the whole time we were there. But on that first day, in addition to that hot breakfast they made us, I filled up a bowl with fresh fruit and sprinkled granola and nuts on top, and it was fine. So after breakfast, it was just funny. One of the servers asked if we liked what we had, and we genuinely did. But the only problem, and it's not huge, the only problem is that that's what we had every morning. So like I said, we had soy milk the next day for the cereal. But I really was surprised that there wasn't something different each day. It's just different than what I've experienced before. The truth is, at home, depending on the season, I eat the same thing every day anyway. And, even other couples, because they had options for what they wanted, whether it was salmon or eggs Benedict or bacon and whatever, they had, kind of 3 or 4 options to choose from, the other couples who were at the breakfast tables. And you know what? A lot of them ordered the same thing every day because they liked it. So really, it's not a big deal. It was fine. It was delicious, but it was just, I've seen more creativity in other places, but it was great. So that was number 31. That's where we stayed. And so to get from our hotel to the downtown area in Dublin, we had to walk through St. Stephen's Green every day, or several times a day often. It's a beautiful park. It's full of statues of literary luminaries, and I highly recommend walking around this small park if you have the chance. It's just really lovely. So we went through the park and we walked a bit around the pedestrian-only Grafton Street area, which is a major shopping area with street musicians and such. We're not big shoppers, so we just kind of passed through there every day, never really stopped to shop. Instead, we headed straight to Trinity College, and we walked around there, which was lovely. And we saw the Book of Kells, which is at Trinity College, which, frankly, we were both a little underwhelmed by. But anyway, we also saw the Long Room, which is an old, impressive library at Trinity College, which was really lovely. So, we're literary geeks, so there's going to be a lot of literary geeky things that we do and we really like. So the Long Room was something we really loved. For lunch, we went to Cornucopia. And so Cornucopia is one of the vegetarian restaurants in Dublin. And interestingly, it seems that Ireland has a lot of gluten intolerant folks. Very interesting. So a lot of places had gluten-free baked goods that weren't necessarily vegan, but sometimes I would see gluten-free and vegan baked goods in a lot of places. So Cornucopia was fine. It's kind of cafeteria style, and the food was okay. It was nothing amazing. Well, the soup was really good. The soup was really fantastic, but it was just, kind of basic food. But we were thrilled to eat at a vegetarian restaurant. So that was Cornucopia. After lunch, we went to St. Patrick's Cathedral, which was quite impressive, built around 1190, which is ridiculous. And we experienced our first rainstorm there. It was a hailstorm that came out of nowhere, and we threw our hoods on, and the storm was gone just as quickly. And then from there, we went to Christ Church, and that was built around 1030, which is ridiculous. It's incredibly beautiful church. Both of these churches were. And we went downstairs to this, it's kind of this crypt in Christ Church, and we were watching a little video about the church, and I literally started falling asleep watching the video, and so it was time to go back to our hotel because we hadn't, like I said, we hadn't slept or stopped since we got to Dublin that morning, having had an overnight flight, and we hadn't slept on the plane. David did a little bit, but I hadn't. So we went back to our hotel and we went to sleep, and we were pretty much in for the rest of the night. The second day in Ireland, we had the same breakfast, which was great. And then we took a long walk down to Kilmainham Jail. And if you haven't been there, and if you are interested in Irish history at all, I highly recommend it. It was one of the highlights of the trip for me, of the whole trip. It was very sad, very, very, very important to go there if you are interested in the history of Ireland at all. And so we were there for quite a few hours. And after that, we headed back to the center of town, very tired, very sad, and famished. And admittedly, this is a case where I took too long to eat. We were there for a long time, and I didn't have any food on me. I did not heed my own advice. I didn't have any energy bars on me or anything. And even though we passed several stores on the way to where we wanted to eat, I didn't want to fill up on junk. So we just kind of pushed it a little too far. So we were pretty hungry, and I was a little cranky when we got to the Temple Bar area, and we were in a bit of disagreement about where to eat. I was just happy to stop anywhere and eat anything because I was starving. David thought we might find something else a little better. So we argued about this just a little bit. And one of the guidebooks that we had, this wasn't even a vegetarian guidebook, but one of the guidebooks we had said that the Dublin Film Council, or whatever it was called, the Dublin Film Society, which was really cool to just be there because, we're big film buffs, had a really good cafe that had really a lot of vegetarian friendly options. And after looking at a bunch of other restaurants, we decided to land on that one. Now, vegetarian friendly is not the same as vegan friendly, and we learned that pretty quickly. But we looked at their menu, and we landed on a few items that looked like they would be vegan friendly or vegan. And the server came over, and we asked her about them. The problem is that it was on a Sunday, and their menu is very different and very limited. So when we told her we were vegan, she said, "Let me just go to the kitchen and find out what they have." And she returned to us saying that she just discovered that they are not a very vegan-friendly restaurant, particularly on Sundays. And so, in short, they had nothing for us to eat. But it was okay. I mean, this is probably one of the few cases where I've actually walked out of a restaurant, but it wasn't we weren't mad, and they were very friendly about it. But it was funny because she said, I think there's a restaurant around the corner that quote unquote caters to vegetarians, she said, but she wasn't sure what it was called. She knew where it was, and she kind of pointed us in that direction. And so we left to go to that restaurant, starving at this point. Well, it was so funny because it turned out to be Juice, which is another vegetarian restaurant in Dublin, very vegan friendly. And we already had this on our list of places to go. So luckily, this all worked out really well. Definitely nicer than Cornucopia. It had lots of options. The service was a little wonky. The food was good. I ordered some brunch items. I had a really nice tofu scramble and roasted potatoes. David had a crudité of like hummus and pita and a miso soup. My scramble had a side salad, and I remember really loving the salad there. And this might surprise you, but I have to tell you that all of the salads we had in Ireland were some of the best salads I've ever had, especially outside of California. We get pretty good salads here in California, but all of the salads, which you would not think would be really good in Ireland, were really good. Better than salads that we get on the East Coast of the United States, like in New Jersey and elsewhere, where it tends to be just like iceberg lettuce and some old tomatoes and some bad dressing. I mean, honestly, the salads were just fantastic in Ireland. So I remember that about Juice. So we were satiated and we were filled up, and I filled up my tea thing, even though I left my tea thermos there the first time we went to Juice, and the server ran out after me and gave it to me. I didn't learn my lesson because I left it there another time, but that's to come. So we left and we just let the music carry us to where we wanted to go next. And, we were in the Temple Bar area, which is a very touristy area, but frankly, we had a really awesome time at a pub in the Temple Bar area. We met some guys from Belfast. They were actually at a stag party, and we had a really good time with these guys from Belfast. So we were there, and then we went back to the hotel for a rest, and then we were heading out at night. And we went to dinner, and the restaurant we went to is a Thai restaurant near Grafton Street. I can't remember the exact name of it. No, the name of it is Siam. The name of the restaurant is called Siam, and it was lovely. Really lovely restaurant, really pretty inside. Absolutely delicious. A couple of the appetizers that we ordered were vegan by nature. And then we custom ordered a couple dishes for the both of us, since all of their dishes, it seemed, use fish sauce in their, in the different curries and stuff. So they just made delicious entrees for us without fish sauce, obviously just using soy sauce, because that's what fish sauce is all about. It's just about the salt. So they made us some delicious dishes with tofu and veggies and rice. Lovely restaurant. I highly recommend it. Okay. Siam in Dublin near Grafton Street. Then we walked around a bit and we landed on a really awesome pub in Marion Square called O'Donoghue's. And if you really want some great music, really prides itself on fantastic music sessions, highly recommend O'Donoghue's. It's a little tight inside, especially near where the kind of sunken stage is, but there's outside seating. There's an outdoor patio. Really great place, O'Donoghue's in Marion Square. Now, the third day, we woke up, we went to breakfast. And by then, I'll just tell you this because I think it might be helpful if you're traveling around here, and you may already know this. But one of the things we did on the advice of other people who had gone to Ireland is we left a few days open in the middle of our trip where we did not have any reservations for hotels. And I am telling you, I am not someone who does that. I am someone who likes to have everything planned in advance, and I am not good at kind of winging things because I don't like limbo or unpredictability. So it was a really big deal for me to leave 3 nights open in the middle of our trip. But what was happening as we were finishing up our time in Dublin, we were originally supposed to go down to Kilkenny and then around Ireland on the southern part first, and then wind up on the western part and then drive across to Dublin on the day we were supposed to fly out, which really seemed stupid because it's a 3-hour trek across the country, which is very short. But if you're going to meet to the airport, it just felt really stressful and overwhelming. So I reversed it. And so I called the hotels that we had in Kilkenny and Connemara, which were the only 2 hotels we had booked. And it was perfect because I was able to switch it all around. So what we did when we left Dublin was go straight to Connemara and just reversed our trip. So we went down south from the western part and then back up and ended up in Kilkenny right before we came back to Dublin to fly out. So it was really helpful. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if I had all of these other reservations in the middle of our trip. I would have had to either lose money or just not make this decision, or it would have just been a pain to change all of these reservations. So anyway, a little bit of advice. It was really helpful. Some people could do it with, some people could do it and make no reservations. I wouldn't be able to do that. And also because I love picking hotels. David always tells me that if there were no animal suffering in the world, I should be a travel agent because I really love finding really special places to stay. And we do. We've stayed in some really special places. So that's something too. I really want to stay in cool places. And I'll talk about the most special place when we get to Connemara. So our third day in Dublin was another packed day. We don't mess around when we travel. We went to the Chester Beatty Library at Dublin Castle, which is remarkable. They have amazing exhibits there, amazing permanent exhibits. If you ever have the chance to go, it's at Dublin Castle. It's called Chester Beatty Library. This guy collected everything from Egyptian papyrus text, beautifully illuminated copies of the Quran, of the Bible, European medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. He has the earliest known copies of the 4 Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles from the Bible and letters of St. Paul. The earliest known copies of the letters of St. Paul, and very early copies of Old Testament fragments. I mean, we're not biblical scholars but it's remarkable to be in the presence of these papyri dating from AD 250 and 200. It was pretty amazing. It was an amazing exhibit, and I recommend it. We grabbed lunch at another vegetarian restaurant called Blazing Saddles. Now, Blazing Saddles is just a takeaway joint, so it's not anything fancy at all. It's just a takeaway place. And we had delicious soups. We had a white bean with vegetable soup and a fennel and celeriac soup, pizza and a pasty and a dessert, really good fresh bread also. So that was another vegetarian restaurant in Dublin. And then from there, we went to the Marshes Library, which is the first public library in Ireland, established in 1701. And then we were pooped and went back to our hotel, and we napped, which I never do. And then we got ready to go to dinner and to the theater. And we went to Juice again. It was just convenient to go back there on the way up to the Abbey, and saw The Plough and the Stars, which was an amazing, amazing production of this staple in Irish repertory theater. It's really fantastic. It was amazing, but that was the night that I left my tea thermos in the restaurant. I didn't know it until we were in the cab up on the way to the theater, and it greatly affected our plans for the next day. But I will not bore you with that. I knew this episode was going to be longer than usual, but I promise I won't bore you with that. So we got the thermos back, and then we went to Fresh, which is another vegetarian restaurant in Dublin. And I'm really sorry we didn't go to Fresh before. It's in a beautiful space, a really beautiful building, this renovated building. Really lovely. And oh my God, they had so many vegan options. They had more vegan options than just vegetarian options. And we got a bunch of things for the road because, like I said, we were hitting the road to go to Connemara that day. And so we got beet salad and bean salad and desserts and green salad, just a ton of food for the road, which was amazing. So that's called Fresh. And with that in hand, we ran across the Liffey River to go to the General Post Office, which again, if you're interested in Irish history, you must go there. And we wanted to see the statue of Kilcullen there at the post office. And we finally hit the road to Connemara. Now, it only takes about 3 hours to get across. We didn't have any traffic getting across, but we hit horrible traffic near Galway. So we didn't arrive at Ballynahinch Castle until 6 o'clock. Now, this castle hotel is probably the most beautiful place we've ever stayed. I've talked about Montali in Italy, which is, number one and number two of the most beautiful places we've ever stayed is Ballynahinch Castle in Connemara and Montali Country House in Umbria in Italy. Ballynahinch is so special. It is the ancestral home. It's a castle. I mean, really, it was built as an inn, actually, years before. I think it was built in around 1684, and it was built as an inn, but it's a castle. It's a stone castle. It's gorgeous. And it's the ancestral home of Richard Martin, also known as Humanity Dick, who lived from 1754 to 1834. And he was one of the pioneers of the animal protection movement in the United Kingdom. He was a member of Parliament, originally the Irish Parliament, and that was dissolved. And then he was a member of the UK Parliament. And he worked tirelessly for animals his whole life. He was one of the founders, although there's speculation whether he was a founder or just someone there helping, but he was involved in the founding of the RSPCA, which is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. He fought against cruelty in general, but brought up many specific bills to make bear baiting illegal and dog fighting illegal. One of the bills he's most known for, which was to protect cattle from ill treatment, was called Martin's Act of 1822. He was amazing. I mean, he dedicated his life to animals. He was born in Ballynahinch Castle. He was born, like I said, in 1754, and he lived there for many, many years. It's been a hotel since 1946, and that's where we stayed when we went to Connemara. It is so difficult to describe how beautiful this place is. It's absolutely beautiful. You can go to the website. I'll spell the name for you. It's Bally, Bally, Nahinch, N-A, and as in Nancy, Hinch, H-I-N-C-H, Ballynahinch Castle. It's simply breathtaking. Unbelievable. And as soon as we walked in the door, we got there around dinner time, we were greeted by the hotel's manager, who immediately began telling us that he and the chef had just finished going over what they had prepared for our dinner. The appetizer was sushi. It was these beautiful sushi rolls. One with avocado and the other one with roasted red peppers and other veggies rolled in black sesame seeds. They were just so thoughtful and so beautiful. The rolls weren't thoughtful. The rolls were so thoughtfully made and beautiful. And the salad was delicious. Again, a delicious salad. The entree was huge. The entree was this roasted butternut squash with a kind of creamy mushroom sauce. Honestly, when he first told me that it was roasted butternut squash, I thought, oh no, it's just going to be this, roasted butternut squash. That's all it's going to be. But the chef just made it so beautiful. He put this sauce on it, this creamy mushroom sauce, and it was roasted to perfection. It was huge. I really forced David to eat all of it. I mean, we were stuffed, but I just didn't want to send it back half eaten because I wanted them to know how much we appreciated the thought and the time they put into our beautiful entree. It was just beautiful and just delicious. And then dessert, David could not stop talking about dessert. He still can't stop talking about dessert. The dessert was, there were caramelized pineapple chunks with a lemon sorbet and a peanut brittle. This peanut brittle that was just amazing. So that was our dinner that night. And then breakfast was also very good. They took such good care of us. And it was really funny because our server at breakfast came over to us and said, what would you like for breakfast? And I said, I don't know if they've prepared something. The chef knows we're vegan, we're in room, whatever. And I don't know if they've prepared it. And the server says, yes, what would you like? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if they've prepared something. And he again very politely said, tell us what you'd like. Just name what you'd like. And I thought, oh, okay, you want me to tell you? Okay. I said, so how about sauteed vegetables and sauteed mushrooms and roasted potatoes and, the roasted tomatoes again. And he wrote that down. And then I said, toast and jam is great and fresh fruit is great. And they already had cereal and we had our soy milk there. So we were quite sated by the time we finished. Believe me, I don't eat this much food when I'm home for breakfast. So they took really good care of us. And then we went for a hike behind Ballynahinch, which was truly the wilds of Connemara, just an incredible hike. We were gone for several hours. And when we got back, we drove to a nearby town called Clifton. The town itself wasn't anything spectacular. It was just a coastal town. And the ride there and back was very pretty. For lunch in Clifton, it was pouring rain. And we just made our way to an Italian place. And they made us a wonderful pizza. It was a thin crust pizza. We asked for no cheese. And they just put some olives and some basil on it. We just wanted that. We could have asked for more vegetables if we wanted. But we just wanted a plain pizza with tomato sauce and then a salad and French fries. Perfectly fine. We were pooped when we got back. So we napped, and when we woke up, we ate the rest of the pizza and some of the food left over from Fresh. And then we went down to the pub and we were just going to order another salad because I had already eaten some of this food. But they made a stuffed zucchini squash with a compote of tomatoes and red peppers and herbs. They were just so thoughtful and lovely. It was just fantastic. The next day we had another delicious breakfast and we went on a brief walk, and then we headed out to Gort, which is where William Butler Yeats had lived in what was a small 16th century Norman castle, which was pretty much a tower that Yeats had restored and named Thor Ballylee. And he lived there with his wife and children from about 1918 to 1929 as their summer home. There was an attached cottage, and both the cottage and the tower were closed for repairs when we got there, so we couldn't go inside. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the little tour. But since we were the only people there, it was also raining this day. When we got there, it was raining. We hopped the fence because nobody was there to see. So we hopped the stone fence and we explored the property in the back. We walked around the river that runs through the property. The place is absolutely just so romantic and so beautiful. It was an absolute fantasy come true for us to be there. I'm a huge Yeats fan, and if you're a literary geek, I highly recommend you visit Thor Ballylee. It's an incredibly special place. And after that, we went to Coole Park, which is not very far from there, which is related to Yeats. Coole Park once belonged to Lady Gregory and her husband, mostly her husband, and then Lady Gregory when he died. Lady Gregory was a very good friend of Yeats. He helped him buy Thor Ballylee. And Lady Gregory also co-founded the Abbey Theatre with Yeats. She was a friend to many artists, and she was also a playwright herself. So we went to Coole Park, which is now a park. It's open to the public. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I think the original property that her husband owned, he was like governor of Ceylon or something at one point. And so they just had a lot of money, and they owned like 10,000 acres. But over time, much of it was sold off, and now it's a beautiful park. I think it's about 1,000 or 2,000 acres. Beautiful hiking trails, beautiful lake. We did too much that day, and we did not stop for lunch because we still had to get all the way down to Dingle, which was still several hours away. So we just ate Cliff Bars and nuts as we drove. We made a quick jaunt to the Cliffs of Moher, which was really stupid because they were pretty, but we needed to get down to Dingle, and we got down to the car ferry. We had to cross the Shannon using a car ferry, and we didn't get there until after 6. And we watched what we thought was the last ferry drift across the river. Luckily, it wasn't. We had to wait an hour for the 7 o'clock ferry, and we did so in a dingy little pub, and we just had French fries. So not the best dinner ever, but we were more focused on sightseeing that day than on our bellies. And we still had another like hour and a half, 2-hour drive down to Dingle once we crossed the Shannon. And when we got there, we arrived after dark, and again, having told the hotel in advance that we were vegan, they knew immediately when they looked at our reservation. They just looked down and they said, so you guys are vegan. You must be hungry. You've been traveling all day. And they called a local restaurant for us, a local restaurant called Fenton's. And they wanted to make sure the restaurant was still serving food. And they were. So we arrived at the restaurant, and the server and the hostess knew immediately that we were the vegans when we walked in. And the menu had some very good items, vegan-friendly items. I keep saying vegan-friendly items. Obviously, we ate vegan items when we arrived. And I think we each got a salad. I just wanted something, I really crave salads when I'm traveling because I don't want to eat French fries all the time. So we got a delicious salad, each of us. And that night we also discovered a health food store that was right in Dingle. And we saw that there were several cafes that openly advertised their vegetarian fare. And the vegetarian fare also happened to be vegan friendly. There was also one full-on vegetarian cafe. They made me a delicious smoothie the next day. They had soy milk on hand. And then to boot, there's a farmer's market on Fridays in Dingle. And we had probably what was one of our favorite meals of the whole trip. One stand at the farmer's market was devoted to Mediterranean fare. So we got olive tapenade, olives, sun-dried tomato pesto, hummus from this place. And then we got fresh pita and other kinds of bread from another stand. And we were pretty excited. I mean, we felt pretty prepared after that. There was actually a stand selling gluten-free vegan baked goods, but we didn't get them because we had enough. But it was fun to see that. It was fun to see that at the Dingle Farmers Market. So we went down to the marina and we ate our food at the marina. It was really one of our favorite lunches. And then we went for a drive on the Slave Peninsula, which was stunning, absolutely stunning. And then we took a boat out to the Blasket Islands. So it was a really full day. Dinner that night was probably the most challenging of any trip that I've ever been to. Not horrible, just challenging because we were basically in a seafood town. Everything was about the seafood. But a couple of restaurants actually had openly vegetarian options on their menu. And I mentioned the vegetarian places before. They were cafes and they were not open at night. So most of these were just restaurants down by the marina. And we didn't want to go back to Fenton's. We just wanted something different. We really could have just gone back there. But we were walking around and one restaurant, I don't remember the name of it, said as one of their entrees, vegetarian meal of the day, whatever that was. So we went inside and we asked what it was, and they said it was a vegetable stir fry. And it was actually very good. It was probably the worst meal of our trip, being that we just didn't have a lot of options, but it was actually very good for the worst meal of our trip. So it was great. You don't go to Dingle for the food. You don't go to the coastline of Dingle in a seafood town for the food. You go for the music. If you want some of the best music in Ireland, Dingle has it, the best music sessions every night of the week in any one of the several pubs. So we went to several of them and heard just some of the best music in Dingle, and I know some of you listeners out there know what I'm talking about, Laura in particular. It was really fun to be there. We really loved it. We had breakfast the next day, and again, not the most amazing food ever, but we had our soy milk at the hotel, so we had cereal and fruit and toast, and we were good to go. And the next day, we really wanted to get out of the peninsula. We felt like we had seen enough there. We'd been there for 2 days, and we wanted to get to Kilkenny, which has a lot of medieval ruins within and among its walls, and we were very interested in history. So we wanted to get to Kilkenny, and this is what I meant when I said before to not have reservations, because we really had the flexibility to change our plans and leave the peninsula area. We were going to go to Kerry originally, but we just thought we had seen enough of what was beautiful coastline, and we wanted to get to some medieval ruins. And so we decided to leave and made reservations, or extended our reservations at the hotel in Kilkenny. But on the way to Kilkenny, we stopped at, and we'd already planned for this, we stopped at the Donkey Sanctuary, which is a magical place if you can get there. If you live in Ireland and you haven't been there, or if you don't and you're visiting, please go to the Donkey Sanctuary. Please go. They're doing amazing work there. I love them so much. We spent a lot of time with the founder, who was so flexible. We had changed our plans to get to the sanctuary several times because of originally we were going to be there on a different day, and they were so flexible. And so we met with the founder, who was just an absolute doll. He was so adorable and is just 100% dedicated to these animals. And it was very special, very beautiful place. And we spent several hours there. So you can go to thedonkeysanctuary.ie to learn more about them, and please support them. Please support them if you are able. So we left there in the late afternoon. We stayed a lot longer than we expected, cuddling with the donkeys and talking to Patty. And so again, we just ate snacky food on the road, and we arrived in Kilkenny again around dinner time. We were tired and we were hungry, and the hotel we stayed at, which is just fabulous, it's called the Butler House. It's right behind the Kilkenny Castle. As soon as we arrived, the person on duty, they just took care of us again. I have to tell, I don't know if this is, across the board in Ireland, but one of the things I can say for sure about Ireland is the hospitality was bar none. the best hospitality I've seen in any country. Just everybody just really kind of anticipated our needs and helped us immediately. They were friendly. The vegan thing was not a problem at all. So when we got there, she just, again, assumed we were hungry, and she asked if she could recommend a restaurant for us. And she looked down at the reservation, she too, and saw that we were vegan. And she said, I'd love to recommend this Italian restaurant. It's one of my favorite Italian restaurants. And we said, that sounds great. And she immediately called them to see if they had tables available, and they did. And when she called, she said, and the people who are coming, they're vegan, and would that be a problem? And they immediately said, no, not at all. So she got off the phone, and what was really remarkable is she got off the phone and she said, they'll take us, no problem. She said, I'm not even sure what vegan really is, but they said they'll take care of it. And it was so sweet of her because she was never condescending, even though she didn't really understand what she was asking for. She did it anyway. And I think the point I want to make is that these places where we had these experiences, these places who are accommodating to our needs reflect their own stellar customer service. So what I'm trying to say is I think vegans need to stop being apologetic and self-effacing about asking for what we want. If a restaurant or a hotel or a bed and breakfast prides itself on its reputation for being hospitable to their customers, right? That's the whole point of these service industries. If they pride themselves on that, then it's a reflection on them, not veganism. So if people are not accommodating, it's not because there's something wrong with being vegan. It's rather a reflection on poor customer service on the part of this business that should value their customers above anything else. And that's certainly what we found in every place we went to in Ireland. It was, yes, we'll take care of vegan first. And by the way, what's vegan second? Just that it reflects amazing customer service, and that's what we experienced everywhere we went, including the Butler House in Kilkenny. The dinner was amazing. It was a truly authentic Italian restaurant. It's called Rinuccini Restaurant, and we didn't have to veganize any of the things we wanted. There was amazing antipasti, some of the best antipasti we've ever had. Delicious arrabbiata pasta, real spicy pasta. Delicious salad. There was sorbet for dessert. And it was a really beautiful atmosphere. And you might be thinking, well, you're in Ireland. Why are you eating Italian food? And I would say, I didn't go to Ireland for the cuisine. I grew up on Irish food, essentially. I grew up on what we would call Irish food. I grew up on roast and potatoes and heavy, creamy food. That's not what I crave. That's not what I want. I didn't go to Ireland for that. I went for the history, and I went for the music, and I went for the literature, and I went for the natural beauty. And so finding delicious, wonderful food like at this Italian restaurant was a bonus, and we were thrilled to be able to enjoy it. But I didn't have any desire, neither did David, to have Irish, cuisine, quote unquote. There is more to a culture than just that, and we didn't feel like we were missing out on anything at all. And the next day, we had another great breakfast. The person in charge of breakfast had bought soy milk for us. She knew that we were vegan. She bought rice cake. She bought oatmeal. She bought fruit and cereal and yogurt, which was interesting. I noticed a few people who knew we were vegan suggested yogurt. So there's a perception that yogurt is not dairy and thus vegan, but that's fine. She just pulled all this stuff out to show us and was so gracious. And we had that on both days, just, again, a huge breakfast. For lunch, we had, pizza and garlic bread at another Italian restaurant. Dinner was amazing. We went to what was a new, lovely Indian restaurant. Oh, goodness, I can't remember the name of it. Oh, my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. I'm pausing to go figure this out. Okay, I just found it. I really did. It's called Royal Spice in Kilkenny, and it is on Patrick Street. I'm pretty sure this is it. Yeah, I'm certain it's it. It was really lovely. And another one of the hotel managers had recommended it the next night when he was recommending a restaurant for us. And he said it's one of his favorite restaurants, and it was delicious. A little oily for my taste. It was pretty rich, but it was absolutely delicious, and just a ton of vegan items on the menu. We loved it. So Royal Spice in Kilkenny. And like I said, the next day's breakfast was equally abundant. And I even asked if they wouldn't mind if I took the rice cakes with us, since we were headed to the airport that day and we wanted to have some snacks with us for the flight home. So she just piled us up with the rice cakes and fruit and apples and cereal that we took with us as well. So I was was prepared for the airport, always planning in advance, always thinking ahead. And on the flight home, of course, we had another vegan meal on the plane, just as we did coming out on the international flight. It was United, I believe, United and, I can't remember the other airline, but basically the food was vegan, and it was very good. And so that's it. It was just amazing. We found so much abundance when we were there. I mean, like I said, we went there for so many reasons. And everything was fulfilled and then some. And then to boot, the food was fantastic. We were thrilled. We were very happy. We were fine. And I know some naysayers would still say, but it's still so much trouble being vegan. You have to spend so much time finding a vegan-friendly restaurant. You have to call in advance to make sure you're accommodated. And like I said, you miss out on the native delicacies in different locales. I know a lot of people say that. A lot of, non-vegetarians say that. And I just don't agree. I just don't agree with that perception. I think there are higher principles than gustatory pleasure. And I am happy to choose nonviolence and compassion over hedonism or gluttony, knowing that I'm making a peaceful contribution to the world and a healthful decision for my body is worth what someone might consider inconvenience. In the grand scheme of things, I want to look back on my life and know that I had my priorities straight, that I put my money where my mouth is, that I walked the walk, and that I was true to what I believed in. That will mean a heck of a lot more to me than having eaten delicately spiced animal parts and secretions in different parts of the world. It's not a sacrifice for me to be vegan. It's a matter of living consistently and consciously and compassionately. And that feels better going down than any animal-based product. And may you find the same. May you travel within and beyond your comfort zones and find reflected back at you the same abundance that you are giving to the world. This is Colleen with Compassionate Cooks. Thanks for listening.